Welcome back to Ristar. We're now moving into the final part. And first things first in this part, we have what's got to be a little nod to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This just screams Ice Cap Zone. There's no way it's not an intentional nod. It's just gotta be. It's just one of those things that, yeah, if you got an ice level, we gotta have a little skiing section. Although that was a bit underwhelming. It looked like he fell down a pit for a minute there. Which, Ristar, you should probably be careful about that, mate. But anyway, Planet Freon is quite... I'm going to have to say the word cool, aren't I? Because that's the thing that comes to mind. I do this every time I'm talking about a game where I see an ice level and I just go to say this looks cool, and then I realise what I'm doing. I'm not trying to make a pun, but I've made the pun. Yes, it is cool. It's a chill level. And yeah, you kind of get what I'm trying to say. I like this level. I will say that the slidey physics can be a little bit annoying. That's not a Ristar thing in particular. That's just a general ice level thing. The general principle of ice physics is it just makes the control more difficult. So from a gameplay perspective, you see some ice and you kind of think this could get a bit annoying, and sometimes in these games it just does. I mean, some games do ice levels pretty well, I think. There's obviously Ice Cap that I mentioned. I could go either way about Sonic 3 and Knuckles Ice Cap. I really like Sonic Adventure Ice Cap. Sonic Adventure Ice Cap's cool because, you know, you got the be cool, be wild, be groovy section, and even though that is like one of the easiest parts of any video game, there, like, I think you have to glitch shit out if you want to die in that part of the level, but still, it's just such a thrilling ride down the mountain, sliding on the ice. But yeah, I completely skipped over that level there by talking about irrelevant shit, but that first act was the one with Ring Rink as a song, and Ring Rink, that sticks out to me because somebody I know, won't name, but they're the kind of person who thinks Sonic and the Secret Rings is an underrated game, so use that as a judgment to their opinions. They told me that it sounds sort of like Cool Edge from Sonic Unleashed. I don't hear it personally. Maybe the bass if you sped it up a little bit, but yeah, it doesn't really sound like it to me, but you know. Now, the natural evolution of an ice level is to move the ice level underwater. And again, I don't mind the underwater sections in this. I talked about this a lot in Planet Undertow, but now you kind of get a feeling for what this particular planet is, because think about the temperature Ristar must be in here. Not only are we in an icy level, but we're in freezing cold water. This must be absolute bloody nightmare for him, the sort of state he's in, and I kind of think it could have been a good idea if they had just like him freezing, him shivering animation. I can't actually remember what his idle animation is. It might be something like that. In fact, actually, I think his idle animation in Planet Freon is he just picks up some ice and starts throwing it around, or it might be an ice cream, something like that. It's something that uses the ice. But yeah, I would like to see shivering Ristar in this kind of thing. I think that could be funny. But I do not envy Ristar's situation right now. And this is another example of how ice levels in games can be really pretty to look at. And this actually takes a different look to a lot of ice levels, because I've mentioned this many times before, but an observation I've made with ice levels is they tend to prioritise either a white art style, like think Cool Edge, think the outside parts of Ice Cap, or they take a blue style and think more the inside parts of Ice Cap. Whereas this is going for more of a turquoisey mixed with some aqua blues. And that, I think that works well in the setting of the game, because we're thinking this isn't an ice place on Earth. This is set in Planet Freon, which is as far as another solar system entirely. This is miles away, so you think there would be different shades. Here, like over on Earth, we have our very distinct Arctics. When we think of ice, anything either in real life relating to ice or in fiction relating to ice. We initially visualised the poles, you know, the North Pole, the South Pole, the Arctic, the Antarctic. Whereas here, what they've done is they've sort of changed it around. And even now, we're moving into the boss level and they're prioritising the purples while still having this ice aesthetic. It's just something very different to what we usually see, and I think it's another thing that gives Ristar a lot of character, because it does really explore Ristar's world that he lives in, or Ristar's solar system that he lives in. That little bit more than just being another ice area. But this boss here, his name is Itamor. That might be pronounced Itamor, I don't know. If it is, then that's a bit of wordplay that fits. Now this guy is one who changed quite a lot from the Japanese version, because in the Japanese version he's got a sort of mechanical robotic cat look to him, and the reason why they did that in the Japanese one is there's a certain Japanese expression, a kind of idiom, that relates to people who don't like hot food or spicy food having a cat's tongue. That's something that just wouldn't translate well into English. It's not an expression that we have over here, so they just redesigned him to be a big motherfucking blob of gook, which is very different. I can see why they didn't translate. I think I much prefer the Japanese design. I've seen the sprite that they used for him in the Japanese version. But that's not the only thing that got changed, because I went over the story earlier in the playthrough, but the story is quite a bit different in the Japanese version of Ristar. In the English version, as you know, Ristar is both going to save his father, who is the legendary hero, and also liberating the planets whose leaders have been taken over by the mind control. Now, the mind control thing is still present in the Japanese version. However, the difference there is that the character of Ristar's father is entirely created for the English one. He never existed in the Japanese version. Instead, his role in the Japanese one was kind of filled in by a character called Oruto, who is a star goddess, and this star goddess was the one who received the initial prayer from the planet's residents to go and save them, and it was her who called upon Ristar to go on this quest. And I can take the story either way. It makes more sense for it to be his father, although I think there are allusions to the star goddess being Ristar's mother, so it's not quite as explicit as it is in the English one, but you can kind of see that maybe she has that degree of control. Though it does make you question, if she was the one who received the call, then why didn't she go and do it? Why did she call on Ristar, who is this very curious child? I don't know, I don't really get much about the Japanese one. I haven't played the Japanese version, I haven't seen the cutscenes for it, I've just, looked up the plot summary online, so I'm not as familiar with that as I am with this one. I think the story in both versions does all it needs to do though, because it's a Mega Drive game, it's a platformer, all you really need is an excuse to go and fight dudes and go through levels. I am curious why they decided to change the story though. It seems like the sort of thing that's really random to change, especially given there's not really that much cultural significance to the original story. Some of the changes, like the thing with the ice level boss, I can understand they changed it because that's a thing that just wouldn't be accessible to English players. But that original story isn't Japanese significant or anything, it's just a story of a star goddess sending a small character out on a mission. That's really easily accessible to people with any culture, so it doesn't make sense that they changed that. Now, Planet Automaton. The level here, I know I'm kind of near the end of it now and at the mini-boss, but I think it's probably one of the most challenging levels up to this point. There's been a few different climbing sections that are a little bit fiddly. There was that weird part where we were sort of swimming through the air, which is weird. And there was also one part where I was grabbing at the walls, and that is one particular mechanic Ristar has that can take a little bit of work to get used to, because it's not quite as smooth as, say, Mega Man X when he climbs up a wall. Now, you have to keep on reaching out and re-grabbing, and if you let it slip, you will start falling down again. You have to really be on the ball when trying to do stuff like that. I believe the way I went is a bit of a shortcut. I think you could go the other way if you wanted to, but I always go that way because, you know, it seems like the most direct route. But you do have to be careful not to land on a bunch of spikes, because no one likes landing on spikes. Especially not Mega Man, but thankfully Ristar does have 3 hits left if he gets hit by spikes. He's not like an instant death to spikes like Mega Man is. But yeah, that's the first Automaton level out of the way, and coming up next is the Automaton level that I don't like that much. So the thing with this level is it's broken up into all these different rooms, and that's fine. You know, you have different segments you go through one at a time, but the rooms do start getting a little bit samey, even though they have all got their own unique challenges that they throw at you. After a while, I think this level does outstay its welcome. Not as much as it does in the Game Gear one, at least off the top of my head. And that's the thing I haven't talked about. There is actually a Game Gear version of Ristar. And the Ristar on Game Gear, it's actually a really solid Game Gear adaptation. It's not a direct pull. It has a lot of traits in common with the Mega Drive version. Like, you go through mostly the same levels, except they're all designed slightly differently. There's different traits to them, there's different quirks. Some of the bosses are different as well. It's not a direct pull, it's not a direct, like, scaled down version, it's just loosely based on the Mega Drive version of Ristar, which I probably will end up covering Ristar for Game Gear either later in the year, maybe next year, we'll see. Because that is a game in itself that I don't really see many people cover. I see most people who cover Ristar just cover the Mega Drive version and leave it at that. But in terms of the Ristar lore as well, or I guess development, however you want to word it, there were actually plans to have a sequel of this at one point. And that was one thing that I have another quote from Akira Nishino on. And apparently in the Ristar sequel he says, the plan was to introduce 3 more shooting star characters. Like Ristar, whose trademark is stretchable arms, each of the other stars would have had distinguishing features, such as their legs, body or hair. And that kind of, it raises some questions to me as to how well that idea of having multiple characters would have went down, because part of what makes this world feel as great to me as it does, part of what connects to me with this game is I kind of like that we are just the one and we're going through all these different worlds. I guess that wouldn't be thrown away completely if Ristar had like some friends along with him, maybe some siblings or something. That could be done well, but I also kind of like just having Ristar as a playable character. I guess he didn't explicitly say the other characters would be playable, but I kind of guessed the way that he went into detail about how they would have had these stretchable arms and body hair and whatever, you know, like that does sound like he was thinking gameplay mechanics. It could have worked, I guess. I guess like Sonic did okay having extra friends, at least in like the classic games. Sonic friends got a bit more debatable as the series went on, but having Tails and Knuckles playable in 3K, that's not that big of a deal. But yeah, Ristar I think is solid enough of a character to stand on his own, and the worlds themselves fill the extra development spaces. So I don't really think extra characters were necessary. They could have worked, they might not have. But just thinking about this, it does make me wish that Ristar would get a sequel. Like, even now, I think there is potential to adapt on Ristar, make it a series. Although, by the same token, I am cautious as to how it would turn out now. Because the thing nowadays with games like this, particularly ones that there is this large fan demand for between like the smaller groups of devoted fans, I worry that it could end up being more a nostalgia pandering thing than just being a new, good original game. Because like, I don't think a nostalgia pandering kind of game would be inherently bad. I should clarify that. I think if they were to make a new game with these graphics and this art style, and it was just like one of these, it looks like a 16-bit games, I think it would still be perfectly fun to play as long as the level designs and the gameplay mechanics were all on point. That could work in itself, but I think Ristar could do a little bit better than that. Like, I think it should keep the 2D gameplay style. I wouldn't want to see like Ristar adapted to 3D because I just don't think that's necessary. I think it stands up tall on its own as a 2D platformer. But they could do like an original art style for the game. They could like use more complex sprites. Ultimately, I am just being a bit finicky here. I think either way could ultimately work. I just really want to see more Ristar, you know. I think this game deserves much more than just to be left and forgotten about and only really appreciated by a niche audience. This boss here is Uranium, and it's not that difficult of a boss considering how late it is in the game. Granted, you want to watch out for all the different shit that's falling. One of the tricks that I've used there a few times is I like to bait the claw to smack down on him and deal an extra bit of damage. There's always that sense of satisfaction of seeing enemies get attacked by their own shit. I think that's why I like beating up Eggman so much, because he's got like, you know, what is it? The egg dealer from Shadow. That one's the one that I think of when I think of that, you know. He's got the thing that powers up Shadow, he's got the thing that gives Shadow rings. But in this case, you can just get the claw hook to smack down on the enemy himself, and he's fucked. Yeah, I am slightly morbid when I address these bosses, but whatever. I can take it, they can take it, whatever. Anyway, now we've got Planet Automaton out of the way, there's just one proper level left. And that is a huge clusterfuck here. There's greens, there's purples. I think this was intentionally made to look like an unpleasant place to be. And there's also a lot of layers here. You didn't notice because there was no title card. This is called Castle Greedy. And I believe the reason why there was no title card is because of the amount of layers in the background there. There's 3 going on rather than most of the levels, which I believe have 2. I think that means that they didn't have enough space left to put an actual title card for the game. They had to just forego that and just stick another platforming layer in the front here. But we are definitely at endgame now. You can just tell with games, can't you? You can tell when you got this proper intimidating vibe going on. And straight after that little level there, we're going right into a boss here. And I really like this boss, even though it's a very simple attack pattern. Like, granted he's throwing a lot of stuff out for us to dodge, but ultimately all we're doing here is repeatedly grabbing him in the face. He's got that sort of shield thing that doesn't really shield him. You smack that and it goes down, but this is basically the boss. But still, it's like a good late game boss in its tone. Like, it could do with more actual attacks to it that can't be reflected just by doing the same shit I've always been doing. Maybe some things to dodge that actually have a chance of hitting me. That'd be something. But no, it's just a very simple boss, but a fun boss. I don't actually know what this dude's called off the top of my head, but he's down, so what does it even matter? He was on screen for about a minute at most. It's a satisfying feeling just taking down late bosses really easily. I know that's a scrub thing to say, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because this was our transition to the man himself. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the final boss here. This is Kaiser Greedy, and he throws a lot more at you. He's got various different phases that you have to knock out. First, he'll be doing these 4 little things here, and he walks all over the place like he's fucking Dracula or some shit. And you want to pay attention to the enemies on the floor too, because they actually end up helping us out in a bit. But Kaiser Greedy, this is our big guy. This is the guy we've been teased. This is the guy we saw in the intro cutscene. and he is our last challenge here. Now here we go. This is his most damaging attack, because if you fall into this, you die. And the way to secure yourself to stop getting sucked in, because you will get sucked in eventually if you have no leg to stand on, you just grab onto the other enemies that he spawns in. Oh, and I didn't even mention the lightning attack. The lightning attack is really lethal too, because he just appears and then does it. Like, you get like maybe 1 or 2 frames to react to that, so you just want to budge over. As soon as you see him spawning, just get the fuck out of the way, because otherwise he will properly get you there. Thankfully the lightning isn't one hit like the black hole is, but yeah, because I practiced that one and I did loads of takes, I got that down quickly. But this boss can muller you if you're not careful. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for Ristar. So to quickly summarise, because I've done a lot of positive talk about this game, Ristar I think is a fantastic platformer. If you're just the kind of person who likes to go fast, likes to dash through, then I'd say it's still worth giving a chance just to sort of broaden your horizons, because this is the kind of game that if I hadn't already seen loads of other people showing love for it, I probably would have skipped over. But I am so glad I gave this game the time of day, because it's just such a fun game to go through. It's not fast moving, it's not like a shooter or anything hype to describe, but just as a platformer, it's amazing. One of my favourite Mega Drive games, and I've got nothing but love for it. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been the Flameclaw. This has been Ristar, and this is my favourite song on the soundtrack, Star Humming. Until next time, bye bye for now.